I think the Hizmet movement is one of the moderate voices condemning terrorism and violence of any sort. I'm hoping that now, in the light of this increasing terrorism around the world, we'll hear more of the moderate voices that are going on in the movement are being done by other movements also. And I think that's good news. In religious traditions, and they're all doing service around the world. And I really think hear these moderate voices more in Europe, for example, than you do in the United States. I'm Helen Rose Ebaugh. I'm a professor of sociology at the University of Houston Central Campus, and I've been there for many years, and I teach the sociology of religion, especially world religions, and I'm also a researcher there, where I've done research on various sociology of religion related topics. The first time I was introduced to the Hizmet or Gulen movement was 10 days after 9/11. There was a statement in the Washington Post on September 21st protesting the attacks on the World Trade Center, and it was signed by Fethullah Gulen, imam and scholar. And I was waiting to hear the moderate voice of a moderate Muslim, because all we saw in the media was the attacks and these awful Islamic terrorists. And so it was very refreshing to hear that voice protesting the attacks, and that name stuck with me. It was 3 or 4 years later, in fact it was 2005, I was invited by the Journalists and Writers Foundation from Turkey and the Swedish ambassador to Turkey. I was invited to Gothenburg, Sweden for a Haran conference. And at that conference, there were religious leaders from Turkey, from all the great religious traditions. And we spent 3 days dialoguing about religion. And there I met the Journalists and Writers Foundation people, and I was very impressed. This is a group in Turkey that is related to the Gulen movement, and they focus upon dialogue among groups, particularly groups in conflict. And it was a wonderful experience. And that same year, we had our first graduate students in our sociology department from Turkey who were followers in the movement. And I directed 2 theses that year focused on the movement. So I began to more systematically learn about the movement. And then in 2006, these students invited me to my first interfaith trip to Turkey. And we visited, of course, in some homes of Gulen followers, and we also visited many of the schools, hospitals related to the movement. We visited Zaman newspaper, the TV station, Asha Bank, that were inspired by the movement. And I was very impressed with the quality of these institutions, especially the question that kept running through my mind is, where's the money? Who's financing all these top quality institutions? And so that question stayed with me. And then in 2008, I returned to Turkey with a grant from the University of Houston to actually talk about the financial support behind the movement. So that was my introduction to the movement. I think that the movement is doing a lot of good in the world. That's what I see. I think that people in the movement are very authentic. They're very sincere about their religious commitments. They care about the world. I was very impressed with the schools and the hospital, and Kimse Yok Mu, which is the outreach relief organization. They send money to disasters all over the world. And the kind of spirit behind the movement is what really impressed me. Lots of enthusiasm, a lot of sincerity. People value the services of the movement. Now in Texas, in Houston, you don't really have an interfaith event without including the Gulen movement, people from the movement. They're leaders in the interfaith community here in Houston. So that's what I see. Very committed, sincere people who have, you know, the good of God and the good of mankind at the center of their hearts. I think Mr. Gulen is a very charismatic individual who came to the fore in Turkey at a very tumultuous time, and he preached sort of a new breath of fresh air on Islam. His main message was that Turkey needed more schools, but not madrasas. He really encouraged the building of schools that would emphasize science, math, technology, all in the spirit of, you know, spirituality and connecting spirituality and science. So it was a breath of fresh air in Turkey. And I think that breath of fresh air is being felt now around the world. So I look at him as a very charismatic person. I have never met him and won't. And I do that on purpose. I've had a number of opportunities to go to Pennsylvania and to meet with him. But I'm a scientific researcher. I was president of the Society for the Scientific Study of Religion. In 2000, I've been very active in that society, and I'm very committed to working out of data. And I told the movement and the people at the University of Houston from the very beginning of my research, I'm on a journey to tell the truth, to get data and to see what the data says. And that I'm committed, if I see irregularities or things in the movement that bother me, I'm as committed to talk about that as I am the positive things. So I felt that if I interviewed Mr. Gulen, or if I was seen by the media with Mr. Gulen, you know, it would weaken that kind of scientific approach that I wanted to have to this study. I think the Hizmet movement is one of the moderate voices condemning terrorism and violence of any sort. I'm hoping that now, in the light of this increasing terrorism around the world, we'll hear more of the moderate voices. I think you hear these moderate voices more in Europe, for example, than you do in the United States. You know, blood and violence and terrorism, they kind of make the news. And news media, I think, find it difficult to present a moderate voice. What do you do except have somebody sit in a chair and interview them? It's not the kind of dramatic footage that all this terrorism proclaims. So I'm very eager for people in the Gulen movement, as well as other moderate movements, to really speak out and condemn this terrorism. And I think it's happening. I heard a wonderful talk Tuesday night at the Houston World Affairs Council by Karima Bardon, I think is her name. And she documents these moderate voices around the world that are condemning terrorism, that are putting their very lives on the line at stake to protest this terrorism. And I think the Gulen movement fits in that. I get asked this question a lot when I lecture around the world. What's unique about the Gulen movement? And that question actually led us to study 7 movements around the world that have roots in religious traditions, and they're all doing service around the world. And I really think basically what's unique about the Gulen movement is that it's Turkish in origin and it's Islamic. I mean, so much of the works that are going on in the movement are being done by other movements also. And I think that's good news. I mean, there's so much need in the world. Let's all get on board. I think they're wonderful. I think there needs to be a next step. But I think what they're doing in terms of interfaith dialogue is wonderful. For example, the Ramadan dinners in which they invite people of all religious traditions and have a program and have people from different religious traditions sitting at the same table, eating a meal together. It's wonderful. I'm a big believer that the best way to do interfaith dialogue is one-on-one. Getting to know someone personally of a different religious faith. And that's what was so wonderful about teaching world religions at a big university, like the University of Houston. You had people from all religious faiths in the classroom, and they got to be friends. And I think that's a wonderful thing that the movement does. It provides these kind of opportunities for those kind of friendships.
The Hizmet schools are open to women, are open to girls, and provide in some areas the only education that these students have. And so again, it would be a very sad day if these schools were not there.
I would like to say, I guess, that this is a movement that has a lot of lessons to offer, especially in today's world. And I think that it's important to learn about the movement.